want to also thank Evan for bringing me on board 2 years ago. I've seen you work in the past 3 years and how dedicated you are to the cause of AFLA, and especially with addressing as well the crime of aggression by bringing one voice within the African states. And it's an honor for me to be on AFLA's board with you. All speakers today addressed the great suffering of victims in the DRC, whether it's victims of child soldiers, victims of sexual violence, or victims of mass displacement. And Mrs. Segun even said in the last few minutes of his speech that some crimes are so serious that the whole world has an interest to see them punished. And for me, the core issue of this morning by all speakers goes back to the first session we had, which is the crime of aggression that the DRC is facing, and which has, in my opinion, cascading effects on the victims in the DRC. Because aggression is the mother of all crimes, and it's the triggerer in the field for war crimes and crimes against humanity committed on victims. And the DRC is both victims of mass atrocities and a victim of aggression. And it's the women, it's the children, it's the girls, it's the young boys that are suffering in the DRC that bear the consequence of the crime of aggression and of the gap, the jurisdictional gap. And the DRC faces extraordinary level of violence. We heard it this morning, displacement, exploitation, human suffering, and victims come from remote, unserved communities with little access to justice, with little access to information or basic security. And from what I hear from our speakers, we need to accompany justice systems and not replace them. We need to listen to the voice of victims in order to understand what they need. And the supports can only be effective if we accompany them, and if we also accompany national institutions. Justice cannot be parachuted in. It must be built with the local actors, integrated in national realities, in national culture, and responsive to community needs, responsive to women, to mothers, to pregnant women, to children. And we also heard from lessons learned at the ICTR that transitional justice mechanism in the DRC can also have a positive impact, but it requires institutional reforms, and it also requires financial support. The DRC today is suffering from a form of aggression that cannot be addressed before the ICC due to the court's current jurisdictional limitation. And the gap has profound consequences. There's no accountability for the root cause of many international crimes that the victims are suffering in the DRC. And the victims, they feel abandoned by the international system. So we need to create conditions in which we can assist the victims in the DRC. We heard of child soldiering, and the child soldiers are often recruited because institutions are weak, because communities are destabilized, because families are displaced. We also heard that child soldiers can be recruited because they feel the need to defend their family, they feel the need to defend their community, and they feel the need to receive financial gain in order to be able to support their family. And we heard that 40% of child soldiers are in Africa. but we must also ask ourselves, is it not also because most African states, a lot of African states, feel have the consequence of some aggression by their neighboring state? The gap in the crime of aggression didn't come up only 3 years ago. It has been there for a long time, and the DRC has been living the consequences for a long time, which has escalated in the early 2024 in the early 2025 when the M23 captured a part of the DRC. And I was quite shocked when I heard the numbers. We heard child soldiers, but we also heard my colleague talking about rape, and also talking about the fact that every 40 minutes a child was raped in the DRC, which means that while we were sitting here this morning, 2 children were already raped. So if we don't close the accountability gap, if we don't assist in bringing the crime of aggression at the same level as the other core crimes before the ICC, these victims will continue suffering. And because, as I said, when you have an aggression, it triggers the other core crimes. So, in conclusion, the DRC is facing a unique challenge. It's both the victim of an aggression and the victim of international crime. And because the ICC cannot prosecute the crime of aggression, victim remains unrecognized and unprotected. And this gap must be addressed in future reforms. So we need to be able to sustain capacity building for national institutions in the DRC, get lessons learned from other conflicts and other institutions. We heard yesterday about Central African Republic. We heard what Rwanda has done. We need to include the victim's voice, especially women and remote communities. And we need to acknowledge child soldiers both as victims, but also as perpetrators. And we also need justice to progress and has to be designed to restore dignity, accountability, and national resilience. Thank you.
Mylène, thank you very much for your excellent review of the substantive contribution of the panelists. Your review brought back to us the key issues that were so effectively presented by the panelists this morning. Thank you once again. So, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is now open for your questions, and please let us be mindful of the time. So once again, I invite you to ask your questions and to let